How's it, dude? Do you ever notice how all phones are pretty much the same nowadays? I mean, back in the day, we had all these cool designs. There was no determined shape, color, operating system. It's clear to see phone design back then was just more fun. Nowadays, every single phone is a rectangular slab of black glass with a few muted color options. The only way to tell the difference anymore is the orientation of the cameras on the back. So, what happened? How did such a fun and creative industry become so bland? Ever been a fan of phones, you've probably noticed that over time, phones have kind of gotten less creative, and they've been losing a lot of their character. I've sort of thought this in the back of my mind for a while, and as a new wave of phones comes out every year, it seems like the brand new features are less and less of an improvement. Additionally, the physical form of the smartphone has become more and more standardized. Nearly every phone looks the same now, and any deviants from that path seem to be wiped out, with very few exceptions. Any and all creative ideas seem to fail in today's market. We saw this with pop-up selfie cameras, modular phones, small phones, and pretty much anything LG made. Tech enthusiasts like myself have noticed this for a really long time, and to be honest, this whole thought kind of kicked off when I heard this on the Waveform podcast.
I feel like that just made all of us realize like 5 years ago we loved phones.
Yeah.
Because like everything we said from like 2015 to 2020, we were like, oh my God, that was awesome.
When you look up the pictures of these things, they're so cool looking. And now they just look the freaking
the
same.
grin on my face when I got to say HTC One, and then it slowly faded away. Like the light left my eyes. I said S24, S25.
Practically the only thing that differentiates these things now is how the freaking camera looks.
Yeah,
That's
much.
it.
And whether or not it comes in gray or...
I gotta say,
This sentiment is in deep contrast with how we treated phones in the past. The further you go back, the more fun the designs are. The 2000s were ripe with weird shapes and fun colors, not to mention all sorts of flips, swivels, and slides. The iPhone revolutionized the market in 2007. The early days of Android saw all sorts of fun experimentation and inventions of all sorts of features. Then came the rise of enthusiast powerhouses from OnePlus, HTC, and Google. Not to mention the explosion of affordable models from Xiaomi and BBK. And of course, all the experimental stuff like gaming phones and the aforementioned LG phone division. Then there was just kind of a shift. Huge experimental companies like Nokia, LG, HTC, and Motorola have faded from the scene, losing much of their market share and even failing in some cases. Today, the majority of the market is held by 3 large companies, and the whole industry seems to have settled. It seems that over time, phones have shifted from a fun accessory to this emotionless rectangle that we can't live without. The claim, phones are all the same now, has been echoed by many on both sides of the battle, iOS and Android. Throughout my research, I found that this claim has 2 major factors, and they both mean 2 different things. The first is the horizontal claim, meaning that all phones on the market today seem to be the same as each other, and the second is vertical. Phone models don't seem to change over time. While both totally separate claims, they are somewhat linked. To understand the sameness on the market today, we have to go back and see how it all started. Now, it's easy to point to technology from the 2000s or even the 2010s and say, see, look, technology was better back then. While that opinion is certainly popular, it's hard to imagine being able to function today with nothing but a Nokia brick phone and an iPod Classic. And then there's the obvious rebuttal to that argument. Well, phones today are more capable than ever before. How could they possibly be worse? What that response fails to understand is the rate of improvement. Back in the day, every new upgrade cycle of phones was exciting. What new feature would come out? Or what new use case would the company invent for my device? The early days were exciting. Your phone became an integrated music player, capable of internet browsing. Then it was a GPS and a camera in your pocket. Over the years, they added 4G, then 5G connectivity, larger batteries, and even better cameras. Advanced biometric locks meant that your phone was a secure database. And then they even promised it would replace your computer. On several occasions, by the way, and that has never worked. The 2010s was a renaissance of crazy and wacky new things that your phone could do. Many of these things failed, but many others have become taken for granted on today's phones. But all of a sudden, these huge leaps just kind of slowed. Software on new phones has become heavily reliant on new AI features. That's about all the new stuff you'll get. On the hardware side, a new camera orientation, a slightly bigger battery, and a 2% decrease in bezel size is the most exciting thing you'll get. This is not to mention that between iOS and Android, they are constantly promoting a big feature that the other one already had. It seems every year at every press conference, the most notable thing about the new device is a feature existing on another device, AI software, and a slight spec bump. But while these specs increase over time, so too does the requirements of day-to-day usage. This means that even though change is happening, albeit slowly, perceived performance increases are basically a flat line.
Like, what was a good smartphone battery life like 8, 9, 10 years ago? It's like, oh, all day. If it could last all for an entire day of battery life, that'd be pretty good. Now fast forward all the way to 2023, and what is a good smartphone battery life? It's 1 day, all of a day, maybe 2 days if you're lucky. So it doesn't feel like it's advanced that much.
Many will point to this lack of creativity and say that phones have peaked. I've gotten this comment in my comment section plenty of times. But I don't think that's the case. Why has innovation and design seemingly plateaued in phones of every major company? What caused these companies to slowly homogenize over time? Well, there's several factors. The first is jumping into AI features. AI computing is very resource intensive and often takes up a lot of the time and money these companies have for new products. You may notice that some of the companies that focus specifically on design, like nothing, don't really make AI a priority. It's a lot of work and often takes the fun out of your product. The other factor is success over time. Let's choose Samsung, but this applies to most companies. They were obviously very innovative with their designs at the start. They were constantly trying new things, for better or for worse. And over time, they learned what worked. Every new thing that succeeded would be built upon, and any feature that failed would be ditched. Over time, they started to try less and less things. That's what people point out when they say that smartphones have peaked. But it's really more of a, let's stick with what works. I mean, their flagships for the last 4 years have been nearly identical. They have become actively incentivized by their own success. Why try anything risky if changing could make them fail? So Samsung, along with many others, have become somewhat complacent with their design. That's not to say that their phones are bad. In fact, they're quite good. But it's to say that innovation has slowed a lot over time for every company. So the change over time, or vertical aspect of the question, is mainly due to the world's recent focus on AI, as well as risk aversion within the companies at the very top. Hopefully that explains why these phones have been so similar over time. But how come these phones are so similar to each other? Today, it's clear what a smartphone is. Every big company designs their smartphone the exact same way. A rectangle of glass and metal, sometimes plastic, with cameras on the back. It almost always has the same dimensions, somewhere between 6.2 and 7 inches diagonally, with very little variation. For the longest time, the biggest way to identify a phone was something unique, like the shape or the orientation of the keyboard, but now it's just the shape of the cameras on the back. Manufacturers have defined entire product lines based on how the cameras are oriented. For a while, the Pixel line was the outlier. Still near a standard smartphone, but with a fun, quirky software, and then there was that oh-so-unique visor. That was about as weird as it got. Then it slowly became just like every other phone. Companies simply improved their phones by making them a little bit more like their competitors. The result is an average of an average. Seriously, without these unique camera layouts and the logos, there's not really a way to tell the difference. So why have all of these major manufacturers sort of homogenized into one unit? Well, it turns out the reason these devices all look like the same product is because they kind of are, or at least the process of producing them is almost identical. After a few generations of success, the parts become easier to come by. Companies build the phone around major components, a chip, a battery, and a screen. All parts that have become optimized for the current tech landscape. So let's say you're Apple. Your most recent phone has been selling well, and you want your next generation to do well. So you order similar parts from the same manufacturers. Because you've worked with them before, you get it cheaper. And because it's 1 year later, you may get newer technology. This is where you get a lot of that like incremental spec bump. It's just whatever technology is widely available at that time. While building a phone, you have pressure to build it like your last one because it succeeded, but you also are restrained by the dimensions of the current product. All these parts are for a rectangular phone. Let me explain it a different way. For example, and this is extreme, say you wanted to make a circular phone. It would cost so much more to make this circular phone than a rectangular phone with the exact same specs. Simply contracting somebody to manufacture these slightly different parts would raise the price significantly. So, the supply chain itself incentivizes phones to be the same. Another factor is competition. When something goes well for another manufacturer, every other one eventually adopts it. This is why everybody copied Apple's Dynamic Island, or why Apple finally adopted USB-C, because it was first introduced and made successful by a competitor. That takes the risk out of new features, although usually it takes legal pressure for Apple to finally catch up. So not only is each individual phone an average of itself over time, but an average of every other competitor's. That's what makes these phones so similar. Now don't get me wrong, competition is good. That's how we get good devices. But when any and all meaningful changes are almost instantly copied by every other competitor, there's no huge reason to pick this phone over this phone or any other. Realistically, I'd be happy with just about any phone on the market. Many of you may be screaming at your screens right now. There's one major recent innovation that I haven't mentioned yet: the resurgence of folding phones. Flexible screen technology allowed manufacturers to bring back the flip phones of the 2000s. But today, the same problem remains. It's really just morphed into a new form factor that are just as standardized as slab phones: a fold and a flip. And any others are deemed too weird to ever have a chance of succeeding. So back to the original point, many will say that phones have peaked. but I just don't agree. The companies haven't so much as peaked as they have grown complacent. Do I think we could have better phones today? Absolutely. I just don't think it's worth it for these companies. They've found what's successful, and for the most part, we're all happy with it. So that begs the question, where do we go from here? So the clear answer to this sameness and diminishing returns that we're getting in the market today is competition. Surely if some company rises up with a brand new take on design, the entire smartphone industry would shift and speed up again. Just like the original iPhone did to feature phones in 2007, maybe we could get a whole new classification of device. The truth is, that's easier said than done. Plenty of companies have tried and failed to do just that. Competing against billion-dollar supergiants is hard, no matter how good your idea is. While no individual company has a monopoly, the idea of a smartphone does, with very little room for change. We saw all these failures with Essential Phone, LG, that weird Palm reboot, and of course, the modular phone concept. But today, plenty of small manufacturers are still fighting the uphill battle. Nothing is redesigning Android phones from the ground up with functionality and style. Fairphone is leading the charge in hardware repairability, and of course, there's the dumb phone movement, which is incredibly interesting. The reality is that slab smartphone will stay exactly the same as long as it's popular. Today, the majority of the market is okay with that. But as time goes on, the public attitude may shift back towards that idea of fun and innovative tech that we had slowly lost. As always, dudes, I'm Owen Cook, and party on.